All right, BobalosRex here, and it's finally time. We are talking about the Haranir because y'all can see my history with the Haranir since the War Within, which we are going to be discussing the Haranir's history from the War Within into Midnight and beyond. So, y'all know how long I've been waiting for this. So in this video, this pro Haranir video, by the way, be warned, we are going to be happy about the Haranir in this video. We are going to be talking about the Haranir's history from the War Within into Midnight and the campaign. So, spoilers. If you are about to get Midnight and want to experience this fresh, you can go into it, come back to this video. Alright, because I am going to be talking about the campaign. So full spoilers on that. I do recommend coming back, especially if you do the campaign and you like the Haranir, come on back for sure. Alright, if you're a little like, what's up with them? What's going on? Come on back too. But I'm going to be getting into spoilers. So we're going to talk about that. Then we're going to talk about what is Harandar. What is the Haranir and the Harati tribe. We're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about the Legends of the Haranir, an event coming soon near to Harandar near you. All right. And then we're going to be talking about even more. We're going to talk about the history of the Haranir, all right, which comes about during the campaign. We're going to talk about the history of the Haranir. How did the Haranir get here? What's up with them? All right, you know? And then we're going to talk big speculations for Midnight, The Last Titan, and beyond. So let's get to it, all right? So I'm here in Harandar. So how did this all start? So in an expansion, a little known expansion called The War Within, we met Orwena and her people. She helped us, and we met her, and she was like, yo, we're the Haranir, and all her buddies are like, yo, why are you helping these people? And she was like, yo, my goddess made me. And that's when we started hearing about this goddess, and we're like, goddess? Who's this goddess? And then she starts telling about this goddess. We do some quests with her. And then we get a very big clue about the goddess. But remember early on in the War Within, don't forget about this. We learn about what the Titans did to Azeroth. All right. Don't forget about that. We learn about some stuff about the Titans. So we'll come back to that. But, so then we see Orwena communicate with her goddess. And it's almost like, yo, what's going on? Radiant Song? Goddess? Is this the World Soul? And everyone's linking the Radiant Song to the World Soul of Azeroth herself, and then the goddess that Orwena sees. So we're seeing this connection, and we're hanging out with Orwena. She helps us in Undermine. She hangs out with the goblins of Undermine, you know, because her people bail on her, and she's kind of like on her own. And then after Undermine, Orwena's like, all right, I got some stuff to do. So she, at that point, would have probably come back to Harandar, or maybe been going about, you know. I don't think we know quite really what she did. But cut to Midnight, you know, which didn't happen much longer after the stuff at Khazalgar. We're kind of going, like, the time frame, there's not a time jump, realistically, I believe. So, this stuff's not happening too far apart, because Xalatath is moving pretty quick. Alright, but either way, cut to Midnight, we see the Haranir again. Orwena is here in Quel'Thalas, and she helps us out in the Eversong campaign a little bit with the Light Bloom. Now, the Light Bloom is popping up because of the Sunwell. We learned that the Sunwell is activating, is what caused the Light Bloom to activate across Eversong as well as below. Okay. And it's interesting the way the light bloom interacts with, like, the light interacts with life is it's almost undead like. You would see the plant creatures, the Runtani, that we find out, die and then spawn more. Almost more powerful than the undead, because now you're getting more bang for your buck. One dies, it doesn't just come back, it doubles. All right, so the light really amplifies with life here. So don't forget about that. But then we head back to Silvermoon after hanging out with them, doing the rest of the campaign. And then we do get the option to head into Harandar. And it's here in Harandar. Well, the Haranir, or Wayna, is like, you know what? We need to go to my homeland, Harandar, and discuss this light bloom. All right, because Orwena is of the belief, rightfully so, that the people, her people, can sit idle no longer. All right, and we've known this about her since the War Within. You know, I've always talked about that. All right, so we head into Harandar through the root ways. All right, using magic. You know, it's not like we physically travel through the roots. The Haranir basically cast a spell into a root, into a tree, and travel through the roots of the planet, which in this case would be Emirdrasol's roots, which would be the closest world tree roots to where we're at in Eversong. And then we travel into Harandar. Okay. And it's here in Harandar that we meet the rest of Orwena's people, and we experience this world. Really? It's basically like a time capsule. The way I see it is as a time capsule of ancient Azeroth, but a little bit more so, because not only are there ancient creatures here, but there's plant creatures. Creatures infused with the life of the planet. You know, now more on that into the speculation video in regards to the Emerald Dream and whatnot, but we do travel here through a portal, and it's these roots of Emirdrasil that we land in, and that's when we start to meet our people who are very isolationist. They're like, Orwena, why did you bring these people here? They're not supposed to be here. But Orwena is so well known, and it, like, the cat's already out of the bag. Even though we're getting threatened by some individuals here, we are at least given audience to the elders. All right. So then we are whisked away, okay, to the elders of Haranir society. We also learn that this is a one tribe society. The Harati tribe is the tribe we're talking about here. All right, and it consists of all the Haranir of Harandar, and they are ruled by the eldest of their society, which, to me, Haranir seem to have a normal lifespan. Now, we're going to get into, that's a little bit into speculation, but they don't seem to have, like, the typical thousands of years lifespan of normal elves. Maybe some individuals may get up there in the years, but even these elders don't seem to be crazy old. But we meet these elders, and they're basically like, yo, if you can overcome the trials of the Den of Echoes, the Haranir trials, if you undergo our trials, you will be worthy to exist in Harandar. Basically, you can be on your way. You gotta survive the goddess's trial. Because as powerful as our character is, Harandar is supposed to be pretty hostile. It's pretty hostile. But because life is so plurific here. You know, I'm saying the wrong word. Oh my god. Either way, life finds a way. And even though there's a lot of freaking death, there's a lot of life here. Alright? So we are sent to the Den of Echoes. And it is here that we learn the history of the Haranir. Because the Harati tribe is very into their history. They basically tell their history through paint. Through magical paint. With the Ondas. Which we're going to talk more about Ondas. A little bit into the speculation video. But Ondas has this magical property where the paint comes alive. So we basically go into the Den of Echoes to live the history of the Haranir. And this is where we learn the history. So I'm going to go over the history of the Haranir. So we learn that the Haranir, the Harati tribe, or basically their ancestors, because maybe they weren't, I'm going to tell you right now, they weren't calling themselves the Haranir yet, most likely. But it would be the tribe that would become the Haranir that we see today. They talk about the sacred mountains and avoiding the Titan Keepers, basically Freya. So most likely the mountain they're talking about, they could be talking about Zandalar Mountains, but Freya did probably patrol all of Azeroth, but we hear about her specifically in Hyjal. Alright? So most likely, this is referring to Hyjal. Now, this would have been, because we do hear a little bit later, and I'm going to talk about it when we go over the lore objects, that the Haranir, the Harati tribe, did split from the same tribe of, like, here, we'll go over the art book, but basically the Harati tribe is proto Night Elves. Okay? The way I would describe the Haranir is Azeroth and life infused proto Night Elves. But basically, we have Dark Trolls find the well. At that point, and we are going to discuss this in the lore book. Alright, but I'm discussing it here, because this is the history we learn here. Well, this isn't the history we learn here specifically, but I needed to talk about the history here. So, we got Dark Trolls find the well. At some point, the Harati tribe would split off from the Dark Trolls that hung out at the well before Cenarius met them. Okay? Because the Harati do not mess with the wild gods. They specifically avoided Freya's beasts. So, the Harati tribe avoiding Freya and her beasts in Mount Hyjal came to the mountains of Mount Hyjal. It is also here that we learn, this is where they learned how to become druids, completely wild god, Loaless, through natural magic. They became the animal. They tapped into the animal through natural life magic. And people may be saying, oh, how do you do that? We see it with human druids. We see it with, well, not human druids, but Worgen druids, technically. Even though they get help from Night Elves in-game. The Drust, which were like proto-Vrykul druids, using natural magic. Alright? Look at Haranir, the Life Binder. She uses order magic to use nature magic, You know, you can extrapolate the Vrykul druids using it kind of like that, but they tap into nature magic. All right, and then they use it to become druids. We see it with the Drust druids, you know, more decay magic, but you can become a druid. Like Kultiran druids do not have a low. Ulfar is not a low or wild god. He's just a druid. He uses nature magic. All right. So the Haranir using nature magic wholly of their own at a specific point before Cenarius taught Malfurion, the first druid. I'm really doubting it now, especially with troll lore. Honestly, Zandalari lore contradicts that, in my opinion. Dinomancers are druids. Anyways, less on that. We're talking about the Haranir. So, Haranir learned to be druids while avoiding Freya. Okay. And then, in the roots around Nordrassil, because they do talk about Mount Hyjal specifically in roots. Most likely the roots they're talking about is Nordrassil, one of the oldest trees on Azeroth. Most likely related to Alunahir. Alunahir. I said it wrong. Alunahir. The mother tree. Alright, so Nordrassil, one of the oldest trees. The Haranir figure out a way to go deep down. Actually, there is a point. Actually, here's the thing. It may not actually be Mount Hyjal, because they do mention traveling, right? The routes they traveled could have been Mount Hyjal, but honestly, I think they may have avoided Mount Hyjal because of Freya. Because when you do the delve during the proper story, okay, we see them travel deep underground, right? Descent of the Haranir. They go past kobolds. They go past Nerubian. They go past old gods. So it is possible the first time the Haranir traveled here may have been through the crater, the crevices of Khazalgar. Alright? Okay, but that's speculation. Either way, the Haranir, the story told to us, right, is the Haranir avoided Freya, the Titan Keeper, which dates the Harati tribe separating long before Ashara's rise, right? Long before the Night Elves that we would know became the Night Elves we know, right? Immortal creatures, changed by the Well of Eternity, which is why I don't say the Haranir, the Harati tribe, come from Night Elves, because I don't see the Well of Eternity transformation upon them. Personally, in my opinion, we seem to see these dark trolls come to the Well of Eternity pre-Cenarius. This is when maybe Cenarius is hanging out with the Torrent. Okay, they're like, yo, some of us like the moon and hear a loon. Some of us are hearing the other side of Alunahir, where the roots lead Azeroth, Alnhara. Okay? So either way, they head down here into Harandar, and that's what we learn from the delve. But then, once we finish the delve, and we get that extra little story bit, we learn that when the Haranir showed up in Harandir, following the song of their goddess, the Radiant Song, I may have not I mentioned it a little bit, but yes, the Haranir split off to follow the song of the goddess. All right, we will talk about the lore. We're going to go to the lore books right now, after I get through the campaign. So then we learn that the Haranir came here, and their goddess that they'd been following was gone. She hadn't been here. They were following an echo of the goddess. She had been torn out from the cradle Okay. And the scar left from this is the Rift of All. Alright. And the Haranir found out their goddess was gone, and it sent them into a rage. Basically, enraged at the sight of their missing goddess, the Haranir lashed out, fighting the Rutani, the Fungarian, all the critters, and eventually themselves. Okay, it is at that point the Haranir were like, yo, what the stop. We gotta settle down. This isn't what our goddess would have wanted. We have to stay here and protect these roots. We can let no one know. Basically, they locked themselves up. That's how they felt. That's a little bit of why they isolated themselves, is the fact that they were like, yo, we just went sicko mode. Okay, we're locking ourselves in here. Okay, they're not locked in here with us. We're not locked in here with them. They're locked in here with us. Okay, so the Haranir locked themselves up in a way, and they're like, yo, and then they set themselves goals like, we will protect the roots here for our goddess. We will stop the alms scorn, these abomination creatures that erupt, basically spawn out of this rift. All right, they will fight those creatures. The Shulka will. We do learn about the Shulka, and the Shulka are interesting. So the Shulka basically like demon hunter Haranir in a way, is almost like I describe them. They sacrifice their connection to the goddess to fight the nightmare creations, right? And notice these look a little bit like the radiant echoes that we did in the War Within. I'll have you know here. Very interesting. So we hang out with, or we're still following Orwena because, oh, you know what? I skipped the part. I'm sorry, y'all, because I was talking about the history. So let's go back, right? So let's roll it back. Let's recap the story again. Proper. So we come in. We're like, yo, we got to meet the elders. Boom. We meet the elders. They're like, yo, do our trials, learn the history. Okay. Then we're like, yo, we're done learning our history. We wake up in this city, Orwena's hometown, basically. Orwena's hometown. In the roots, okay, this is when we learn about the deal with Teldrassil, y'all. So, I talked about Nordrassil's roots. I will show off Nordrassil's roots, but let's talk about Teldrassil's roots. So, Teldrassil's roots, which are still here and connected, by the way, very interesting, are on fire. They're burning. They're basically perma-burning right now. But could that change in the future? Who knows? Either way, with the burning of the roots, the Haranir lost a root warden, and we do learn about what root wardens are early on. And what root wardens are basically like the governor of a root area. Basically, no, maybe like the sheriff. Basically like the sheriff of a root area, okay? Because you basically have these little settlements of Haranir, all right? They are all of the Harati tribe. They don't differentiate. Under these roots of these trees. And there's a couple settlements. There's a settlement up here. There's a settlement. There's the den directly under the cradle. All right? So we end up here in Teldrassil roots. And we're chilling with Orwena, and then the Light Bloom attacks. So we're hanging out in this place where we meet the Fungarian and the Rutani, the other the true natives of Harandar. All right, because if we remember, Harandar was found by the Haranir. The Rutani, which are basically the Botani, but native of Azeroth, All right, these creatures, and the Fungarians are native to Harandar. So this is where the Fungarians come from, of Azeroth. So I think that's cool. We finally found their home place. So there's a whole little incident where the light invades. Okay. And the light bloom is now becoming a big issue down here for the Haranir. Now, how that supposedly happened, I'll explain. So basically, actually, real quick, let me finish the story here. So we do learn how to fight back against the light bloom. And it involves Alm Dust, which is that magical dust, which shares a quality with something else that I'm going to talk about in a bit. But this Alm Dust basically knocks out the light sickness, all right, and protects the Rutani, who seem to be most susceptible to this light sickness. Now, it seems other things are susceptible to light sickness, but it takes a little bit more work. But the Rutani here, the flowers, are very susceptible to light sickness. You know, flowers, light, you know, that's how it worked. Now, we learn that the Alm Dust fixes the light bloom, so we head back to the elders to let them know, yo, the light bloom's a problem. We need Alm Dust. Can you give us Alm Dust? And the elders are like, no, leave us alone. Again. So then Orwen is like, fine, I'll get my own Alm Dust. Okay, we'll get our own Alm Dust. Okay, so we head to the Rift of Alm ourselves. Alright, this is where we are introduced to Amarak, and we see Orwena with Amarak, who, they go way back. Right, you should read the Orwena short story. They go way back. They're basically like a couple, but not. Maybe like brother, sister. I don't know. They're like mega close. I don't know what kind of... They're not brother and sister, though. But they're like close. So, either way, we hang out with Amarak. We get some Alm Dust. We learn about the Rift of Alm, about the Alm Scorn, and all this stuff coming out. And we learn about the Shulka and their sacrifice. They basically cut off their connection to the goddess. Because the way it is, the way Haranir are, is every single Haranir basically hears the Radiant Song from birth. Right? We've all been hearing it lately, but the Haranir hear it constantly, and it's this song, this Radiant Song of Azeroth, of Alnhara, their goddess, and they hear it. The Shulka cut off that connection, and we will learn what they use to do it, which I'll talk about when I talk about the Legends of the Haranir. But, so we get the Alm Dust, and then something happens. There's an attack at Haranir in Alnhara, or no. Oh my god, what am I saying? There's an attack on Haranir in Harandar, okay? We head over here, and basically the light bloom is taking over the Rutani area, because this seems to be like the main Rutani area. This is the Haranir settlement near it, and basically this veil has now been taken over by the light bloom. All right, and this was, it still is, the roots of Shaladrisil, okay? Which is very interesting. Now, why is Shaladrisil roots affected? So, it's kind of explained in game as after what happened with the Nightmare, the roots were more susceptible than the other roots. So, basically, when the light bloom crept in through the roots of the, basically, any tree on Azeroth can affect any of these. It doesn't have to be directly connected because of how it works. So when the light bloom crept into Harandar, kind of like maybe how a nightmare could creep in. It picked whatever tree is most acceptable and infected it. And that happened to be Shaladrisil, which may mean we get some content in Legion. You know, I may have to speculate on that more, but the fact that Shaladrisil had stuff going down here, we see the flames affect Teldrassil down here. Do the roots affect Shaladrisil up top? We'll have to see. But either way, these roots are affected with the light bloom, and we use the Alndus to fight back. Alright? And we do succeed in pushing back the light bloom. They're basically like, yeah, you did it. And then it turns out, after we did all this, the light bloom is attacking Silvermoon again. Haldaron, who's been with us, I didn't mention him because, I mean, he ain't Haranir, why do I care? But he was here, he did some good stuff, and he was with us getting the lore, and he tells us, yo, they're attacking Silvermoon. Because one Root Warden, the Root Warden of Shaladrisil, Ruia, is basically got the light sickness himself. You know, he got affected with the light sickness. Thus proving, you know, anyone's susceptible. Just the plant people were more. So, well, I don't see Fungarian. Fungarian be chilling, yo. Fungarian be chilling over here in the Grudge Pit. Alright, that's what they do in Harandar. You know, I'm not going to worry about that rare. But kill rares if you see them. But either way. So we head back to Silvermoon. You know, we leave Harandar. So let's just talk about how it finishes real quick. So we leave Harandar. The elders said they don't want to help us still. We're like, what the hell? Okay, well, we still got to help Silvermoon. Alright? Elders are haters, bro. So then we come back to Silvermoon and we protect it. We save the day. But we thought we were going to be saving the day through Romath burning the trees. Burning the light bloom. But they got knocked out, and the light bloom was going to take over Silvermoon. But then the Harati showed up. The Haranir showed up. We got Hagar showing up for Arena. A goated Root Warden, but not like... She says she's not Root Warden anymore, but I still see roots. She's a Root Warden to me. Okay. Alright. We got a Root Warden show up for us with the elders, because she's an elder, and they finally get a clue, and it's like, yo, the cat's out of the bag. The Haranir exists, y'all. It's Haranir time. So they show up in Quel'Thalas, and we are currently recruiting them. Alright, soon to be an allied race. And that's the end of the campaign. Now, there are more side quests that I need to do. Honestly, there's still so much more to do for me that I honestly need to dig more into. But that's the campaign. Now, let's talk about the rest of Harandar and start getting into speculation. Okay, so what is Harandar? So here's Nordrassil's roots. And we got these lore objects. And one of the things we learn is that the waters came with Nordrassil to Harandar. Which is interesting. Because... Hold up. Hold up. I said wrong stuff, y'all. I'm sorry, y'all. I said wrong stuff. Nordrassil was planted after the War of the Ancients. So yeah, the Haranir couldn't have gotten to Harandar through Nordrassil. They couldn't have. They got to Harandar through Khazalgar. That has to be the case. I'm sorry, y'all. I just now realized that. It's because I'm like all over the place with it right now. So Nordrassil was planted after the War of the Ancients, right? So it was planted over the Well of Eternity, the second one that Illidan created, right? Okay, using the waters of the original Well of Eternity, right? With the advent of Nordrassil, okay? With the advent of Nordrassil, it brought the waters to Harandar. So, back when the Haranir first got here, which would have been before Nordrassil was planted, alright, there was no water. Or not this much water. So, take note of that. But let's go to these lore objects, alright? So, sorry I goofed it there. I got confused. I had to recalibrate. But let's go over these lore objects here. Because these lore objects teach us a lot more. Hold up, though. Harandar. I wanted to talk about Harandar, the zone. So, this place seems to have existed, in my opinion, right? Because now we're getting kind of in speculation. So, the cradle here. What is the cradle? I mean, if we look at it, it looks to be like a conglomerate of all the roots. Now, what started it? What was the first tree? That tree, according to the legends, would have been a Lunahir. Okay, so the way I see it is a Lunahir was planted into Azeroth, which is a staff given to Eonar from Elune to help Azeroth. Okay? So, Eonar puts the staff in, a Lunahir grows, and the roots wrap around the world soul of Azeroth. Alright? Or at least the goddess Alnhara. Alright? Because what if the staff... Oh my god, I just thought of crazy conspiracy. What if the staff was Elune planting herself in Azeroth in a way? And the Titans locked up Elune. I don't know. I think this is Azeroth. So let's get back to it. So the staff is planted. The roots grow, in my opinion, around the world soul of Azeroth. Okay. Alnhara. Then, when Aman'Thul removes a Lunahir, Alnhara is removed. The rift is created, and Harandir is thrown into madness. Alright? As the Radiant Song echoes out to the Harati tribe. Okay? It is at that point we have Dark Trolls having... Here, now we need to go to the tablets. So let's go to these tablets and talk about these different things and get into it. Alright? But yeah, so we have Nordrassil, the oldest tree here. Teldrassil. Shaladdrassil is the second oldest. Then Teldrassil. And then Belameth is the newest tree. Already have roots connected to Harandar. Alright, so let's get to these lore objects. So we're going to go to the first one over here. Alright, so we got the derelict mural. We left the surface to follow the call, to seek the song from the depths. The voice we did not yet know. There were concerns about what those who decided to stay on the surface would do in our absence. Those who would become the Night Elves proper. We knew what lurked in places of myth. We were venturing into forbidden parts of the ancient worlds. Forbidden by who? The Titans? Will it still be our concern if or when their children wake up the dark sleeping beneath them? Is it still our world to save when they engulf it with the flames of their curiosity? Hope is to believe they listened to the warnings and passed them down to generations to come. Now, the Night Elves would go on to fuck shit up, yo. The Harati tribe was right to leave. But here's the thing. I want y'all to know this. They call themselves the Harati tribe. Look at this. Harati tribe. Oh, it doesn't say it. Called to Harandar by the echo of the goddess's song, the Harati watch over her cradle in hopes that she may one day return. I mean, they were calling themselves the Harati tribe. So, to me, the closest thing the Haranir are basically when Night Elves, well, proto-Night Elves, because I don't think that, I wouldn't consider them Night Elves yet, till we get to like Ashara-ish time, maybe a little bit before Ashara, and even then, that is like 12,000 years. 10,000 years ago is the War of the Ancients, but Ashara was around for a bit. Go back even further. Zandalar's talked about, man. So that would have been... Look at the Zandalari, right? Before them would have been the original troll. Okay. Then the Zandalari accumulate around their mountain. 15,000. Y'all know my theory about mortal life, troll life starting about 100,000 years ago. So honestly, them being around when Freya and stuff, which is at least 20,000 plus years ago, because Scaleborn put stuff at about like 25k. And the Titans were around for at least a bit. Like, the Titans showing up and stopping the old gods is probably... Oh my god. I mean, if you want to estimate, we could be thinking like 100,000 to like 50k. We have evidence of the old gods at 150k plus. We got Koresh pushed back to 100k. So we could see the timeline be 100k, Devouring War, Xalatath comes over, Black Empire's been around for a bit, chilling, Xalatath shows up. She does her thing. They quell her. Black Empire chilling for a bit. Maybe like 80 or 50,000 years ago, Titans show up. Mortal Life is around, seeing some of this stuff show up. Because I think Mortal Life would have started developing from the elements. Or even the old gods themselves. And honestly, Platinum WoW put in a really good theory about the old gods digging deep and getting their freedom, their free will, from Azeroth herself, which we will be talking about in a bit. Alright. But here, let's talk about it. It was in the years that followed the rise of the ancient winged beast that even we dared not hunt, that the stone giants scoured our land. So this is talking about, 20,000 years ago with the dragons and stuff. We knew of the poison in their ways, so we hid from their watching eyes while they saw some glory and tells of the stone armies banishing the ancient chaos that covered the old world. We stayed away. We had no interest in their great halls or strange rituals. Our people listened to the song that came from within, not to the monotone staccato of their ordered tone. So maybe we can date the Haranir finding Harandar around that Scaleborn wartime, Tyr, the fall of Tyr, so maybe about 20,000 years ago, before the rise of Zandalar, the rise of Ashara, and all that. Honestly, again, in my opinion, that separates the Haranir from the Night Elves. And even and we do see their difference from Dark Trolls, but I feel like they are very close to Dark Trolls, especially when we talk about their racials. But let's get over to this other tablet over here, and then we'll go up to the one in Nordrassil. But yeah, the Haranir have a lot to them. Alright, so we're going to this tablet here. The Ancient Runestone. The ancient runestone has a carving of several Haranir standing on a forested mountain. They look below at another group of Haranir following a ball that radiates wave-like energy. The ball is taking them deep underground to a cave filled with many roots. Now this is interesting. A ball. This almost feels like a Titan Keeper thing, but it almost feels like, think about the Radiant Song. No, think about the World Soul Orbs. Could it be that? The carving appears... The ball is taking them deep underground to a cave filled with many roots. The carving appears to depict a split within the Haranir Society. Haranir Society. You can say the Night Elves came from the Haranir. Leading to one group staying on the surface while the other takes the journey to Harandar. So this is the Harati tribe split from Proto-Night Elves, which is why I say they're Proto-Night Elves, if anything. You know, they are the... I do have to concede they are kind of the middle ground between Dark Troll and Night Elf. But because of Harandir's magic, in my opinion, they've become something of their own, in my opinion. You know, when you isolate a population for 20k years at least, they've changed a little bit in this magical world. Alright, especially they got quills. Alright, so we're heading to the last one, and then we're gonna get really into... Then I want to talk about the legends of the Haranir, which is gonna start up soon. When we can actually recruit the Haranir. Basically, I'm hoping the weeklies unlock when the launch goes live, but maybe not. Maybe the weeklies will wait till reset. But we'll have to see. But, let's get this last lore thingy. It's behind this hut here. The Forgotten Mural. Never forget the ancient myths. Never forget the slumbering darkness banished down below. They know about the Titans banishing the old gods. That's why I'm saying we see trolls interacting with Titan ruins. I think the trolls knew about the Titans, right? And I think there's a certain point, right, where the Titans were roaming around. The proto-trolls were like, bro, we not messing with them. Okay. And then a lot of the troll tribes would conglomerate around the Zandalar Mountains. A lot of them, especially since though the Zandalar tribes would split apart, or the tribes around there would split apart, later becoming the Yamani, Gurubashi, and all that. But then also, we had a huge population of dark trolls around the well, you know, but also being wary of the Titan Keepers, because we know where Freya was roaming around Highjaw, which the Haranir would go around, because they talk about going around the mountains of Freya. Either they're talking about the Zandalari Mountains, they're talking about Highjaw, avoiding Highjaw in the wild. But the interesting part is, you know what? No. This may make sense here. Hold up. This may make sense here. So, the trolls living around here. So we got the trolls around this. See, literally like this area. Trolls running around here. Trolls spreading out here. The dragons just meeting the trolls 20,000 years ago. So the trolls were spreading, okay? Trolls were spreading out. And I would wonder, you know what? Maybe the Titans didn't order the well. Maybe the well is purely Azeroth energy. I used to think the Titans ordered the well. Maybe not. Maybe not. Maybe the ordering of water happened with the Titan Keepers. The Titans did stuff, but maybe not the well. So maybe the well and the elements help create early mortal life. Like, maybe early mortal life developed around the well and spread out, you know, to Zandalar and out from there. You know, and it is very suspect when they say Freya's great beast. Maybe they mean the old gods she consorted with, right? Do the Loa consort with Freya? Though I still think they talk about avoiding the wild gods, right? We don't see them interact with wild gods. Other than like on Shara, but that's different. That's something else. I wouldn't call that a wild god either. So the trolls were here. They went over here, avoided Freya, learned how to be druids as they were heading to Kazalgar, and basically dug down in Kazalgar. You know, because we see kobolds, Nerubian, old gods. It's almost framing it like Kazalgar. So they follow Alunahir's roots in Kazalgar, because this seems to be where Alunahir was planted, over here. All right, so Kalimdor, Yasharaj, Cthulhu, Alunahir planted over here. So they head over from here, avoiding Freya, over to here. Oh, yeah, you can see it. And then they find Harandar. All right. Never forget the horrors our ancestors met on the great journey. Never forget what brought us to this new home we call Haranir, the radiant song. Always remember that we are united by tradition, standing as one, guided by the song for the goddess who one day will return to her cradle. They loading that in. So, what else about the history of the Haranir? Well, we are going to learn more about their society when we get to the legends of the Haranir, right? Which will fill in some of the gaps, right? But to me, like I said, it's clear. Let me sum it up one more time. We're talking proto trolls find the Well of Eternity. Even if they started to become Night Elves, or is the tribe that would become the Night Elves, right? These are proto-Night Elves. These are tribal Night Elves. This ain't Night Elf Empire, right? When did Ashara make the Empire? Was it made up before her? Was she born into royalty of the Night Elf Empire? We don't really... Is it her that makes the Night Elf Empire? Then that would be 12,000 years ago. So I don't see her uniting the tribes of Night Elves. So they probably had Night Elf kingdoms, you know? You had cities. Like Tyrande had a city. Like, they weren't talking about Night Elf tribes at that point in time. Right? So if we're talking tribes, this is like Dark Troll, fresh Dark Troll, proto Night Elf. Okay? Found the well. Some heard the goddess and followed the roots deep down. Some heard the moon of Elune, the light of Elune, and stayed around the well, and eventually would find Cenarius, find probably the Titan Keepers, which would be where they get Kalimdor from, most likely, or that came from the well, I guess, from the language on the well. But then also, you know, the Zandalari would eventually run into Titan Keeper stuff. You know, look at Uldur or Uldir, you know? And then eventually, yeah, the dragons would meet some trolls up here. So, they found it, they headed down here, and then they came down, realized their goddess wasn't here. The goddess had already been taken, because the goddess had been taken when the Titans... Here's what I think, all right? I think Amanthul pulling out the tree didn't hurt Alnhara, right? Because you could theoretically say that the roots were Aluna here. But like I said, I think the roots wrapped around Azeroth, the world soul. And when the Titans took the World Soul and put it in the World Core, it caused the Rift of Alm. Now, see, this is where we get a disconnect. Are we talking about a physical pulling of Ashara out of the cradle? I feel like there would be evidence of that, but maybe not. But if we go back to Khazar, and this is when I'm going to get into really theory. If we go back to Khazar, right, the Titans basically built the Coreway, which is a seeing eyeglass on the World Soul of Azeroth, right? So they're like peeping in. They're like, yo, there's the World Soul. This is the Prime World Soul, right? If they saw the roots, I don't think this place exists in the physical realm, right? When they talk about Harandar early on, they talk about it being almost extra dimensional, right? Either we are in Hollow Azeroth, like at the very center, and this is where the roots are, or the roots coiled around some kind of metaphysical manifestation of Azeroth, and this is where she was. Though this does look physical, right? Like this would be a physical coiling around, and then the Titans, or it could be like this, right? Even though we have the rift here, and this like sunken part, like almost like she was dragged through here, right? Dragged out of the cradle. Which again, I don't think Aman'Thul literally reached into the cradle to drag her out. I think of it, I see it as more of like a metaphysical manifestation, and the event of her being removed from the cradle caused this like great rift in the metaphysical boundary of this realm, which apparently shares with the Emerald Dream, shares with the Twisty Nether. All right. So I see it as more of a metaphysical manifestation, but we could, like, we are still talking Hollow Azeroth theory here. But we could also see it is the World Core transported magically, arcane magic style, Azeroth's World Soul into the World Core, the prison that Azeroth's would be prisoned by the Titans, where the Titans can use her to power the Manifolds and use her to become this prime Titan, right? Whereas you could see this as a loon trying to make it a life World Soul. You know, if you see the roots is coming in, wrapping around the World Soul and influencing her in a bad way too. But I see this as more of a good thing, as a protective way. Because if you remember, when Haranir asked Elune for help, she said, protect Azeroth's World Soul from the old gods. Alright, so Azeroth, or Elune was like, bet, plant this tree, these roots will protect the World Soul from the old gods. Life will protect from the void. Alright. But then the old gods through the Night Elves would infect the Emerald Dream, which this isn't the Emerald Dream. But we do see the Emerald Dream somewhat connected to the Rift of Alm. If you finish the raid, Emerald Nightmare, which had the Rift of Alm, you end up in the Emerald Dream. So there is a connection there. Alright, and there is a connection between the Dream and Ardenweald. Or, not Ardenweald. I don't know why I said it like that. Ardenweld. But again, the Rift is interesting. The Rift seems to be, like I said, I think of the Rift as more of this metaphysical injury, but it looks pretty physical. I mean, look at this, like, like rift, you know, and this could have been caused from the tree, from a Luna here being removed. So again, the goddess may not even be Azeroth herself, but a Luna here, the original tree that created the cradle. All right. But again, I see it more as a Luna here created the cradle. The Titans metaphysically teleported Azeroth's world soul into their new prison, the World Core. But that's the thing. That's why I think this is more metaphysical, right? I see Haranir as the roots wrapped around Azeroth's dream, right? Her dream self, the spirit, right? The spirit realm. Harandar is that spirit realm of Azeroth that where her spirit existed, and the roots wrapped around it and became this land, right? And as the original tree brought the original sea, sky, and land, right? If you remember that book, it talked about a Luna here being planted in a place of sea and sky and land, like this nexus point, this perfect place. And that could have been where it was, getting all this water and air, all these elements that would create the original bounty of material. You see what I'm saying? Of Harandar. And then as a Luna here was removed in that amount of time, Harandar was created. As a Luna here was removed, it hurt Harandar. But as you see, the roots lasted. Right? The roots had already taken hold. And we see its remnants in Khazalgar. And then the goddess was removed and put into the world core, in my opinion. That's the way I read the lore we've learned from the War Within. And that created the rift, this wound in Harandar, and thus created the Almscorn, which, let's talk about Almdus right now. Almdus is basically Azerite. That's why I'm pretty sure Aluna here, the goddess, is Azeroth, because Almdus is Azerite. And we see basically Azerite take over and push out influence from other powers, right? Azeroth, this prime world soul power, pushes out other power sources and gives you this free will, which is why I like the Platinum WoW theory. That really does connect the old gods too, because we have seen Azeroth's influence give free will in the Khazalgar lore segments. When we see Dawn and the Earthen, the Thragar got free will and the Titans didn't like that. Azeroth caused that. Okay, so we see this free will come from this world soul power, which pushes out influence from the other the cosmic forces abound. Okay, and you can see the clear connection to the War Within. I want to talk about that in a bit, but let's make sure I got all this other stuff done, because I've been jumping all over the place. So I was talking about their lore. Oh, let's talk about their druids. Clearly, they learned how to do druids purely natural. Totally see that. Malfurion first druid, BS. We already knew it was BS when Cenarius had taught the Tauren. Okay? Dinomancers, in my opinion, were druid before. So is Gonk? Did Gonk teach druids before Cenarius? I think he did, in my opinion. But if they're going to be like, oh, well, no, he didn't. Be it. Dude, come on. Dinomancers. That, I think early trolls, proto-elves, had druids maybe let's analyze it like humans. Maybe early night elves, tribal night elves, had druids. Kind of like the Haranir. But as they, built up their cities, kind of like the humans did, they kicked out the druids. They were like, no, you got to do magic, do magic, do magic. Years and years of that. That's how we got the Highborn. That's how we got the Night Elf Empire. Okay, that's what they did. They kicked out the original druids. Then Malfurion, when we finally get to Ashara's time, when we finally get to Malfurion's time, he's like, yo, I'm bringing us back to nature. Finally, after so long. But he was like, no, I did it first. And that could have been the first time Cenarius actually rolled up on the Night Elves. Alright. So. Well, the Night Elves proper. So. Let's get to the tales. The tales. So soon we're going to get these tales. And the legends really get into good stuff. Alright. The legends really get into good stuff. So we're going to learn about these items. Let's see if I can at least see them on here. On the beta, I can see them all. Okay, good. So we got Waynon's Ward. So, spoilers for Waynon's Ward. Remember when we talked about the Haranir Rage? If we think back to the Haranir Rage, we can link it to Azeroth feeling rage for being in prison, wanting that freedom, wanting to fight back. But we can also, troll berserking. That we kind of see it there. All right. So in Waynon's Ward, we hear about Waynon, and he basically kind of loses himself to the rage. It's almost like a Duratan type story because the Haranir also have this rage in them. All right, especially they have the song, and when they go into the rift, the song turns to madness. So Azeroth's song, as hopeful and harmonious as it can be because of the imprisonment by the Titans, you can also argue the nightmare that the Titans would say the old gods did it, but we also have this discordance, this disharmony in the song that can lead to madness, right? And even the light plays upon the madness that life is susceptible to. Light takes life and makes it spread uncontrollably and lash out and pushes it to take over and feeds that rage, the light rage too. All right. Then we learn about the Cauldron of the Echoes. So we have Zur-Ashir. All right. Zur-Ashir are basically like the lore walkers / painters, because of how it works here, of the Haranir. And he is going to take us through the stories of the Haranir here. And the Cauldron of Echoes here is basically the cauldron of the first Zur-Ashir. And it basically takes us through the story of how they learned to make the paint. It's alm dust. It's alm dust, baby. Azerite. All right, it's magical Azerite paint. Then we have the Echoless Flame here. Now, the Echoless Flame also uses alm dust in a way. And in this story, we also talk about Mortaka, which is a malevolent entity imprisoned in the rift. Maybe he'll pop up again. Maybe he's part of the Dream Rift raid, because we are going deeper into it soon. We will learn about that. But we have the Echoless Flame here. So the Echoless Flame here is, again, looks a little Azerite-y. And when I did the quest on the beta, you learn that the Shulka used this flame to burn the song of Alnhara from them. Basically, like demon hunters, they burn. They use alm dust and this magic to basically burn the goddess away from them. But not really. It severs their connection with the goddess. That's how I should have said it. It severs their connection with the goddess. Okay. So that they can descend into the Rift of Alm without being taken into madness. Alright? Because down here... Alright. Azeroth madness will get you. Then we got Rusilla's Outreach. Now, I wasn't able to do this one. Alright? But this is going to be one we do. And what... This one, I think, is the one that talks about how the Haranir unite the Fungarian and the Rutani. Basically, the Haranir bringing peace to Harandar. Then we also have Alnhara's Bloom, which is basically a gift from the goddess to be like, yo, Haranir, I didn't forget you. Alright. Then we have the Root of the World, which I wasn't able to test. And then we have Sky's Hope. Alright. Which will also... Here's the thing. When you do the first one, you're going to meet this person over here. Alright. And this is where I think this story gets very interesting. Because there's more the Haranir aren't telling us. Because they don't know. Alright. So we have Axum here. And he is the High Priest of the Cradle. And he listens to the voice of the goddess in the cradle. I keep the memories as she tells them to me. For generations, someone like myself has held these memories and only passed them on to those who are worthy to know them. Some of these memories are too dangerous for everyone to know. If y'all remember the Calaxy, by the end of the Legends of the Haranir, we will learn more about the Haranir story that they aren't talking about. Now, through the paintings, okay, Azeroth is able to share history that the Haranir never experienced. That is one thing about the paints that the Haranir can do that is beyond them, right? If they use the paints, they can see history. They can see history that happened in a place beyond time through memories of Azeroth. World soul memories, right? Azerite. So, the histories, as they were named, it was early on in the beta, because we do have the names here, actually, if we pull it up here. Legends. So, here's the Legends Never Die. Okay, now there is one more, the Empty Cradle. So the listener is going to be the quest we get once we finish the first one. Then there's In the Name of the Goddess, A Legend to Know, and the Empty Cradle. Now, this originally, right here, this last one was called this achievement was called Day of the Titan. So, I think we will learn more about how and what this was all done, or what was all done with her being taken. But it's going to be after we get all the legends. So I'm excited for that, and it will also either confirm or deny some of my theories about this zone. But that's kind of... Yeah, I think I got most of this page. You know, I talked about Harandar. Y'all should know. I think this is kind of like a little bit extra dimensional. Maybe a little bit of that spirit realm that was tapped into to create the Emerald Dream. Because we do know the Emerald Dream was ordered by the Titans. But the Titans were never able to get here. And it is because the Haranir protected this place, you know? That is why they isolated themselves. If you don't like why they... Let's talk about Haranir society, right? The Harati tribe, right? Again, we're talking about Proto-Night Elf tribe, okay? To me, they are a Proto-Night Elf tribe that heard the goddess's call, Echo, the Radiant Song, long before anyone else. They left to follow her and they led to themselves to Kazargar. They followed the roots of Aluna here, and they wound up into Harandar the authentic way. Maybe they did pass through like a portal, but it's almost like they followed the roots directly into this place physically. So again, this could be a physical place. Or they went deep enough and they found basically the heart of a Lunathir or something, the root of a Lunathir. Maybe the root themselves guided them. Okay, I do think there may be a way to physically get here, like we saw the core way looking down. Maybe the core way is just above there, looking down. All right, that could be the case. Now, if that's the case, then for sure, if she was taken physically from here, like rip. See, that's the thing. I don't think the Titans know properly about this place, especially since there's no like Freya Sworn here. So I'm thinking more metaphysically. They found a portal into Harandar. Oh my god, we saw it, bro. We saw it. Oh my god, they just did. They just did portaled. They followed the routes that we saw and were actually able to port. They had midnight. All the Haranir, the original Harati tribe, they owned midnight. When they went to the root land place right here in Ashkahet, y'all know where the place is. Right, where we originally met them. They touched that area, and instead of getting an error, they portaled into Harandar. They're like, yo, we found it. Then they found their goddess gone, and they got mad. So, first druids. I would say dark trolls were the first druids. I think trolls were the first druids of Azeroth. And any druids that picked it up later, not the first druids, kind of just getting taught later. You know, maybe Tauren beat the trolls, but I don't know. Now I'm going to say trolls first, honestly. Brightcool tapped into nature magic. The Harati tribe tapped into pure nature magic. Pre-Loa, none of that. Alright. Then, here, I'm going to read this. The Haranir, the Harati tribe, carries history from before the arrival of the Titans. They do. They talk about the Black Empire. But again, you know what? That would be Dark Troll lore too. Like I said, the Harati tribe carries the history from before they would be called the Haranir. Remember that. The Haranir carry history from before they would even be considered Haranir. But to them, it's their tribe's history. Remember that. It's their tribe's history, the Harati tribe's history, whether or not they're Haranir at the time or not. Okay? Because that's how it works. So, they travel from the Welt to Hyjal, but not, like I said, I changed that. Proto-elves hidden away from in the roots of Aluna here, protecting Alnhara, Azeroth, using On-Dust, Azerite, to make living paintings of histories, world soul memories. That's what they do. That's what the Haranir do. They use Azerite. They've been using Azerite all along to keep themselves protected from the Uln Scorn and fight back against the nightmare that would consume Harandar. You know, this lost land where the goddess lived and the world soul of Azeroth lived and flourished. You know, under life's influence, for good or bad. You know, some people would say bad. The Titans would. That's why they took her out of here. That's why they removed her. But let's talk about the Harati tribe more. So we got the Elders. They're ran by the Elders. The Elders, I don't think are that old. Haranir seem to have many generations of Haranir. through here. So I don't think they are as long lived as other elves. I think they share lifespan more with trolls, you know. The Jurashers are the lore keepers. The Root Wardens are basically the protectors of the roots, but also local sheriffs. You know, they enforce the will of the elders. And the Shulka are the Haranir nightmare demon hunters. So that's the Harati. Now, I like it. I like what they got going on. They got a little different stuff. The painting aspects I really like. And they basically been isolated because, one, they were worried about them lashing out because they have a history of fighting themselves. And two, they've kind of just been like, yo, we'll live here, die here. This is our home. This is all I ever know. And they kind of just accepted that. Their society accepted that. They were traditionalists. So look to the Night Elves. Isolationists too, at a certain point, you know? Not so much the Highborn, but early Night Elves. I can say they do take a little bit of Warcraft 3 Night Elves, but now we look back at it as Night Elves returning to form, right? Cleansed of the Highborn. The Night Elves return to the natural magics of Azeroth, you know, that their ancestors, the trolls, used, the dark trolls would use, you know, and the Haranir just reflect that. Being fully isolated from the Titan's influence. And now, with that, I think I can finally get into my theory. So let's get serious, y'all. Oh my god, this has already been long, but let's talk about this. So, the War Within. We're talking about expansions now. So, the War Within, let's talk about what it was. All right? I think the War Within was changed. I think we all know the War Within was changed. The War Within was supposed to have the Haranir more on the forefront and did not. Now, is that a bad thing? In my opinion, no, because now we are getting more Haranir. Now, I was really sad. Look at the War Within. Look at my videos through the War Within. I was sad as hell. I was praying for a World Core patch so much, and I got Koresh. But I recovered. I know other people that were sad, but we got the Haranir. And I'm not sad no more. None of the Haranir lore changed. You know? If you want to argue some people didn't connect their writing like that, that's whatever, right? But the Haranir are what they are, and they still are there. So War Within, I think, was supposed to be the Haranir expansion because we have an expansion that would have been made like any other expansion. Story starts, story ends, yada yada. We get the Haranir in the expansion like the Drakthir, bada boom. But no, something changed. Someone came back. Dragonflight was the interim patch to set up some future stuff. Dragonflight set up the War Within and Midnight. Blizzard would have been working on the War Within / Midnight during Dragonflight. Midnight a little bit early, like would have been very early in production, and the War Within would have been in full production. The base War Within. I think the War Within expansion would have been base War Within, right? Then we get, instead of Undermine, we get the Root Lands. Okay? Harandar. Then from Harandar, we go deeper and we get the World Core. And we would have had the War Within actually be the War Within Azeroth. But that changed. Because now, the World Soul Saga is that War Within story. So I know how this is going to go, and the Haranir were key for me. So, the War Within got split up. We're getting Midnight. They knew they were doing Midnight. Avoid expansion, right? So we're in the middle of the War Within. We got the Haranir already hinted at. We're going to expand the Haranir. Yo, we expanding the Haranir. These are proto Night Elves, Druids. They uncorrupted by the Titans, the Titan conspiracy. We're dragging the Titan conspiracy out. We don't have a one expansion Titan conspiracy, right? Because that's what it would have been, right? It would have been a one expansion, the Titan conspiracy. No. They took my one expansion Titan conspiracy and they expanded it. And we got Haranir. But we didn't get Haranir in the War Within. So instead we got Undermine. Right? We needed to pad the War Within. So we got Undermine. Great patch. I loved Undermine. Set up the goblins. Give the goblins a patch. A goblin patch. Because we're thinking about patches now as, you can call them theme parks of a race, but that's what it is. It is a theme park of a race. So we got the goblin patch. Then we got the ethereal patch. We set up this void, right? This void of Midnight. We're setting up Midnight more than this Titan Conspiracy 1 expansion. And then we set up a elf thing after with the Haranir, right? The Haranir were going to be a part of the elf thing of Midnight, because that's what I think. The first part of of the War Within and Midnight were decided in Dragonflight. You can see the hints of Khazal Gar and the hints of Xal'atath into Midnight, right? In Dragonflight. The Steve Denuser one, love him, hate him, whatever. Doesn't matter. I can care less. Dragonflight was good for me. So we lead into Khazal Gar, which was going to be this one thing. Now we got goblins, ethereals in it, leading us into the Void expansion. Right? It's still the Void expansion, but we get Harandar. Right? And people are like, oh, well, why are the Haranir here? Because they're the key to this saga. Right? This is where we learn and where we have, if you remember, early Khazal Gar, we had the Titan the data, the Titan things from Arcades. Right? We have those. We are now getting that in the Legends of the Haranir. So we're going to get more of this Titan conspiracy story getting fed to us. But then, we all know what island we're going to. We're back on the theme parks, baby. Each zone is its own theme park. But if you're going to enjoy it and the story is connecting it, it's going to be good, in my opinion. So we're going to get... Zulaman is good, and it's an Amani theme park of the best sort. Okay? Now, I mean, you can say, oh, well, theme parks are bad, whatever. Oh, it's like a good book. Then call it a good book. If people like theme parks, then it's good to them. Everyone considers certain things good or bad, whatever. So then we got Troll Patch. Then we got, what could be Ashara, what could be Arathi. My bets are all on Ashara right now, especially with the one thing set up in Dragonflight. So I see us get Ashara. Okay. But maybe Arathi. Alright, maybe more this way. Y'all know, but I think we're getting Boop and then Boop over here. Okay, but these can be moved around, whatever. Alright. So then we get that. Then we lead into the last Titan, which is continuing the Haranir story. And you'll see, The Haranir may not be the main brunt of this, but the Haranir were key to what the story was, because they were the key to the original War Within. They would lead us into the World Core from Harandar, from their homeland, or their homeland was the World Core, which I think has changed now. I don't think their homeland was... I think their homeland may have been near the World Core, but it's not. So, we head into North Rant. It starts off with the Titans return, like they've said. The Titans return. The unification of the elves, we got, like they said. We had to hear them, like they said. The War Within was the War Within at the start, and then it wasn't the War Within because it got split across these expansions. But we will now then head to Northrend. And it is here that the Titans will return. We can maybe get the Iridikron patch in between. See his little place. Because he will pop up after the Titans return. And then we will get more Titan stuff, maybe with Dawn and the Earthen. And that will lead us into... below Northrend, the World Core, where maybe Xal'atath got some toes in now. But that is where we will see our final patch of the World Soul Saga which would have been the final patch of the War Within. But Metzen came in and go, no, we're going to spread this. And to me, I now see it clearly because the Haranir were the key. All right? Love them or hate them, they were the key. And they are, like I said, I don't care what the art... I read the art book. But if you analyze the lore and you take it to, like, how this stuff works... And, I mean, we're talking evolutionary stuff, but it doesn't work that way in Azeroth a little bit. We're talking magic. It's not perfect because we're only talking, like, 20,000 years versus hundreds of thousands of years. But I do think they've given themselves enough wiggle room, especially with how much the Haranir have history predating Night Elves. No. They were running around when Freya was running around. Alright? So, that's the way I understand it. And yeah, I think they're key to this World Soul Saga. Now, whether or not they're going to be a big deal in Last Titan, no. But their story instigated this. They are elves, not so influenced by the Well of Eternity, and they knew about what happened to their goddess, the World Soul. And that's the key. They knew the true story hidden from us by the Titans. They're going to reveal it early on, but we're going to have other things to deal with. But then in the last Titan, we're going to finally finish that story with the Haranir, with the Earthen, maybe with all the trolls, Drakari, the Horde, the Alliance, finally confronting the Titans. Because they do want to give us that big story, but I think it all comes to head in Northrend. Alright? I think it all comes to head in Northrend now. And to me, the Haranir gave me the key there. And like I said, I like them. I have a really good time with the Haranir. I have a couple characters I'm thinking up. I'm going to sort them in. And Haranir has been an interesting place to finally go. Now, I kind of wish it was bigger. I have some questions about trees, like Vordrasil. Where are its leftover roots? You know, did other roots just lock into those? You know, because all roots are connected. You know, how physical is Harandar? Right? Because we do use portals to get here, but these are roots. You know, water spawns in, water like portals in a way, or is it just the tree is next to a thing and it magically does it? I think there's some magic to it. I think this is a magical dimension of spirit. I think it's like physical Azeroth, physical World Core, metaphysical spirit home of Azeroth. And that would be where Harandir developed, right? And like I said, the original tree brought the land to Harandar in the first place. You know, this is where it coalesced. Because look here. Look out here. This is just hollow. You know, but we see all the roots. And it's bright up top, but out in the distance, it's empty. It's just twisty. Little roots. It's not like, you know, Ardenweld where you see the trees down there. It does feel like we are in our own little hollow realm. Alright? But the roots got here. The roots of Aluna here got here. And Harandir was created. And proto-elves, early tribes of wild elves. Just elves, nothing before them, just elf. Alright? That's what they would have been. You know, barely from dark trolls, if anything. You know, again, and Harati would carry the ancestry from dark trolls either way. Again, and they picked up traits. And in one day, they will be playable, and I will be playing them. We got thick elves, baby. And I'm in. So yeah, that's it. I think I've ranted enough. Sorry for the early mistake with the Nordrasil thing. I forgot that it was planted with the well and that brought the water. But then it helped me figure out. How the land and water got here in the first place. Because it was like, wait, if there was no water here, how did the Harati drink? Because there was water here, and it came from the first roots. All right. But yeah, and then there's Anshara, Herald of the Goddess. Right, again, not a wild god, but more reminiscent of... And it is interesting. You look at these creatures that Azeroth creates, it does look like wild gods and Loas. So it's like... most of them were probably created by Azeroth, and then Freya was like, yo, are you ready to get ordered, animal? And the animal was like, yes. Or that. Like I said, it's interesting. And the druid thing, I see some people issue with the druid thing, but I'm like, no, we see druids before. Malfurion has had fraud allegations about First Druid for a while. My still big question about Malfurion, though, now. Because this is a problem. This is a big-ass problem. Which may be expanded on. Maybe, dude, maybe they do hit the... This was a tribe 10,000 years ago, and Malfurion's like, oh, I know Harati. I'll be... Okay, if that happens, I'm mad, bro. If Malfurion is like, yo, I know Harati, I met him, that's how I know this is called the Rift of Aln, I'd be so fucking mad. But how does he know this is called the Rift of Aln? Did he just zone in and it was called the Rift of Aln, and he was like, oh, bet, that's what it's called? Like, is that how it worked? You know, did the trees call it Rift of Aln? Maybe how Harandar got his name? The trees named it? But either way, I do have that question. Right? If that turns out to be true, maybe I'll have a little issue with the Haranir problem. But to me, they're proto-Night Elves. Because they still consider themselves a tribe. And no one during the War of the Ancients time was like, yo, we a tribe. No. What? So to me, that carries that troll, that dark troll vibe. Right? Alright, they are the Harati. Anyways, that's it. I like them. You don't gotta like them. But I enjoy them. And I do think this goddess stuff, I do think they're the key to this war within. And we know the Titan's been up to bad, man. We know the Titan's been up to bad. And I can't wait to get this lore. That is a lore rant all upon itself, y'all. But yeah, I look forward to the Legends of the Haranir 2. I think those are going to be fun for people who enjoy the Haranir. Going to be getting some little lore tidbits. It is going to be time gated. But you can use alts to at least know what the other ones say. At least on the PTR you could. But you will be waiting to complete them all for a couple of weeks. But then we'll have all the lore of the Haranir. All the secrets. They got all the secrets of the past. And they got the paint. They got the Almdusk. What is this Azerite? More Azerite doing, right? You know, goes to feed that Azerite is that... how much Azerite was in the Well of Eternity? You know, and you know what? I did also have this thought, right? The Haranir basically hear the Radiant Song since before they arrived, right? Since before they arrived. The Haranir have heard the Radiant Song. Did Eridicron hear the Radiant Song? Did Neltharion hear the Radiant Song? Alright, and what else is going on with the Radiant Song? Because we know it's Azeroth. Help! 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 Set me free! Set me free! Freedom! Free will! Free! But then it also comes with that, Urgh! I'm mad! I'm mad! You know, so there's a lot to it. And we also see how connected Azeroth is to Troll Tribe, the original Troll. You know? Anyways, thank y'all for watching. I can't wait to make a Haranir. I got 2 already thought up. Druid Shaman. We going deep. 1 for the elements and 1 keeping the tradition alive. I'll see y'all next time. Bye-bye.